Now I have seen half of Guru Dutt's filmography.
ए जी दिल पर हुआ ऐसा जादू तबीयत तबीयत मचल मचल गई नजरें मिली क्या किसी से.
Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage. I've reviewed almost 400 Indian movies on the channel, and today I want to talk about the 1955 Hindi language romantic comedy musical Mr. and Mrs. 55. It was written by Abra Alvi and produced and directed by Guru Dutt. I was able to watch it as part of the Criterion's channel Guru Dutt special, and it was my fourth film by him overall. Dennis and I already reviewed Piazza and Paper Flowers, and just recently I also talked about his Par. Mr. and Mrs. 55 was his next film after that, and it tells the story of the young naive heiress Anita who needs to get married within a month in order to receive her millions of rupees worth heritage. Which shouldn't be a problem because she's madly in love with a tennis player. Unfortunately though, that tennis player isn't in love with her, and she's also living with her man-hating aunt who doesn't want her to get married at all. But as luck has it, there's this newly passed divorce law, and I think the story of the movie was indeed super timely, and her aunt arranges a marriage with an unemployed cartoonist just so that they can divorce shortly after and Anita can get her money. But as chance has it, that cartoonist, who is named Pritam, which more or less translates to lover, has fallen madly in love with Anita. And that even before this whole strange plan took shape. Mr. and Mrs. 55 has a pretty neat and archetypal screwball romantic comedy story that's full of misunderstandings and turbulences of the heart. Pritam is of course played by Guru Dutt himself, and I loved how he was introduced, and that his character is completely silent for a while, and that his first words aren't spoken, but instead he bursts out into this lovely love song. The soundtrack, like in Dutt's two previous films, was once again composed by O.P. Nayyar with lyrics penned by Majru Sultanpuri. And while there are some lovely songs in there, it's unfortunately not as great as the soundtrack of Par. But that's also a really high bar to clear. One of my favorite songs though is the one that's dedicated to the romance between Johnny Walker, who of course shouldn't be missed in the Guru Dutt movie, and his love interest Julie, played by Jasmine, who unfortunately quit acting after this movie. Their song and the whole sequence in the office is just so lovely and also wonderfully choreographed. But without a doubt, the highlight of the movie for me is the casting of and the performance by Madhubala, who gives so much life and so much personality to Anita. It's such a joy to watch her, especially what she's doing with her face and especially during the songs. I think this was my first exposure to Madhubala, so I had no idea who she was. When I later found out that she's regarded as a legendary actress in Indian cinema, I wasn't surprised. Unfortunately, I also found out that she died at the age of only 36 because of a heart condition. Guru Dutt himself also died at the age of only 39. Both of them are quite lovely together, but I have to admit that at the end I only liked Mr. and Mrs. 55 fine. It's a well-made, mostly charming and diverting classic romantic comedy, but it wasn't quite able to deliver the same old movie magic that his other films had for me. I think partly it's because comedies tend to lose more in translation than other genres, and I think it has a lot of elements that didn't age that well. At first, it seems to be a movie that might be ahead of its time with the topic of divorce at its center, but as it progresses, it appeared to be more and more backwards in its message. The character of the aunt, who is wonderfully played by Lalita Pawar, has a strong satirical touch, but as time went on, I felt she was portrayed way too negative, and her fight for women was painted as something narrow-minded and bad. There's also this really awkward moment in the movie where a woman from the countryside is talking about what it means to be married, and it includes something like the woman having to tolerate if the man is hitting her sometimes because he's also really loving and caring. And to make it worse, this whole segment of the movie is what makes our heroine really lighten up to the idea of being with our protagonist, which just rubbed me the wrong way. The whole overarching theme and message didn't really come together for me. Of course, you have to keep in mind that the movie is almost 70 years old, but I'm reviewing it today and not in 1955. And while the other aspects did make for a decent time, it wasn't enough to make me fully enjoy it. And it's also just really long with 2.5 hours. This comedy of misunderstandings was really fun and charming in the beginning, how our two protagonists end up in the cinema together or how they get married, but in the second half it did begin to get on my nerves. and I'm also not the biggest fan of many older movies, including some kind of drawn-out courtroom sequence. More often than not, these sequences don't fit in that well, and we also don't really learn anything new during that segment. Of course, it's a comedy and there are some nice bits in there, but still not really a fan of it. I also wish they would have done more with the fact that Pritam is a cartoonist. There's this one caricature that he publishes, but even that could have had a bigger impact on the story. Still a fine film with some wonderful moments, good songs, a fantastic lead actress and enough technical finesse, but just not the classic I was hoping it to be, and in today's day and age, a bit too backwards. So in German I'd say, Mr. und Mrs. 55 hat eine fantastische Madhubala in der Hauptrolle, die diese charmante, klassische romantische Komödie auch ganz gut trägt. Insgesamt hat der Film bei mir aufgrund seiner veralteten Botschaft, der langen Laufzeit und dem doch eher langsamen Erzähltempo aber nicht so ganz gezündet. I give Mr. and Mrs. 55 6 out of 10. It's more like 6.4, but I don't do that.
नजरें मिली क्या किसी से हालत बदल बदल गई.
Alright, that's it like always. Comment below and let me know what you think about Mr. and Mrs. 55. And let me also know which Bollywood movie should I watch next, old or new. You can hit me up on Twitter, Instagram and Letterboxd, and also on Patreon, simply at @JimmyCage. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like. And make sure you hit that bell for all I have to tell.